So I was cleaning up on one of my shelves looking for something else, and I ran across this. This is actually the first model that I built when I got back into modeling in February 2006. My wife gave this to me as a birthday gift, and because we've been going to Barnes & Noble for months prior to that, and I had been looking at model magazines, never building one, and she said, "Why don't you build one?" And I'm like, "Nah, that's for kids." But she went ahead and gave me one anyway, a couple of paints, and it was it's the Academy kit, and I just built it and painted it, and I basically did it like I did when I was a kid. I tried to add a few other advanced techniques that I'd seen in the magazines, but it's kind of fun looking at this and looking back at what I started at, and to see where I've progressed, and just to remember doing this. It was all brush painted. I didn't have an airbrush at the time. I think I used enamels. I'm not sure. I'm kind of surprised at how smooth the paint actually is. If you hold it in the light, you can kind of see the brush strokes, but when you run your finger across it, it's actually fairly smooth. You can see the line where I masked that off, and where the paint kind of gathered up there. There's a little bit of a line, a little bit of a texture, but if somebody else brought this to me and said, "Hey, this is the first model I built and I brush painted it," I'd probably go, "Hey, it's not bad." I'm actually kind of surprised at how less than rough it is. It's still very rough, of course, because it was the first time I had done it in years and years and years. But you can see I tried to do some panel lining. I think I used some acrylic paint and water, and someone had told me to use a drop of dish soap in it, but it only worked out partially. I got some in the panel lines, but I couldn't get it all cleaned up. So you see that there. I used the old Tester's silver paint in the square bottle to do some chipping, and that's a little bright and garish. And you can see here I had trouble getting the decals to set right, so I tried to cover it up with a little bit of paint. At the time, I don't think I used any setting solution on this. I think at the time I didn't even know about it. I did try to make some seat belts out of tape, you can see in there. That must have been something else that I read in one of the magazines at the time. But it's kind of fun to go back and look at it. Yeah, you can see the wash there in the wheel well. I didn't know how to clean that up properly. And there's some seams on there that I didn't know how to deal with at the time. But I got most of them closed up, which kind of surprises me now looking back at it. I did get those closed up. Used the bright zinc chromate green. Man, that stuff is garish. It's like apple green. But there are hints here of trying to do some chipping on the underside, and trying to get some up here on the front and on the prop blades. I don't know that at the time, if I would have taken this model and compared it to one of my later models as a kid, I don't think that there would have been a lot of difference, because I know I did this basically like I remember doing as a kid. I added in a few things that I had read in the magazines, but most of it was doing it like a kid. Now, one of the things that this helps remind me of, and I guess this is the point of this whole ramble, is it takes repetition to improve as a modeler. And I know some folks don't have a lot of time to build. There's family things, so I know sometimes maybe building one or two models a year is about all somebody might be able to squeeze out, just because of other obligations, family, whatnot, which are all important. I mean, I'm not saying you should ditch those for modeling by any means, but more than anything, more than products, more than techniques, more than any of those things. While products and techniques are important, and theory is important, and all of that, repetition is the key. This is the last model I finished, and I'm having trouble remembering because of the shooting schedule, but I think it was the Cooster. That was either model number 374 or 375 since this one. And now I've, over the last 14 years, I've had almost 15 years now, I've had the opportunity. My kids are older. My wife is very tolerant of the hobby. I've just had the blessing of a lot of time to be able to work on it. So I've been able to go through a lot of repetition, I guess you'd say. But when folks ask me about getting better in the hobby, and they ask about, should I get a different airbrush, should I use this kind of paint, should I learn to use oils or enamels or all of these things, and I tell them, all of those things are good to do, good to know, but honestly, I think if you focus on not only growing in those techniques and products, but repeating the process of building a model and trying new things, maybe just one thing per model. If you model a lot, you're going to get a lot more opportunity to try things. But trying new things and repeating the process, evaluating the results you got on the last one, and looking for ways to improve on the next one. So many times people will sweat a model that it's not coming out like they want, so they just kind of give up on it and don't really finish it and don't move on to something else. They just start collecting models, but they're afraid to not have a perfect model. Well, as you can see, I think one of the things that has helped me the most is the willingness to accept less than perfect. And this is definitely an example of that. And nothing I build is perfect. Everything I have falls short of what I see in my head. And it may be that way for you. But instead of pursuing perfect, instead of saying, well, I can't move forward in this build until I get something just right, move forward anyway. And let the repetition, it's just like working out. If you want to bench press, I remember years ago, you wouldn't know it looking at me now, but many years ago, 20 years ago, I worked out a lot. And one of my goals was to bench press 375 pounds. Well, I didn't go into that gym the first day and bench press 375 pounds. I went in and was, barely putting up 135. But within a fairly short time, actually, in my routine, my last set on the bench press was 4 reps of 375 pounds without too much struggle. And it was repetition, week after week after week after week, of doing the same thing and just growing and learning new ways of doing it and learning other exercises that would help me get to that. It's the same way with building the models. Repetition, evaluating your work, and saying, okay, on this one, because I looked at this one and I thought, okay, on this one the paint's not real smooth. How can I improve that? And within just a couple of models, I had gotten an airbrush, and the paint on that model was much smoother because I learned to use an airbrush, and it just grew from there. So anyway, just some thoughts as I was cleaning off a shelf, and towards the back of it found this old P40N from February 2006 when I first got back into the hobby.